Hey everyone, it's Horror Free For All, better known as Goosebumps Completionist, and I hope you're doing well today. So I have here a review of a Haunting Hour episode that I've been wanting to talk about for some time now. It came out in season 1 in 2011. It was written by, I think, Eric Patterson and Jessica Scott, who wrote a few episodes from the show. And the episode in question is The Perfect Brother. Now, this episode, I remember the night it came out, and I watched it, and I really loved it at the time. And I have to say, all these years later, I think 14 years later now, good lord, I still really love this episode. This is one of the handful of Haunting Hour episodes that I think are like fan favorites out there, but aren't necessarily talked about all that much, which is a sad thing, kind of. But in this case, The Perfect Brother, there's a lot going on here that you wouldn't expect, but it's very welcomed. It's kind of fun and unique in terms of its tone for the Haunting Hour, which, by the way, is probably the biggest melting pot of a kid's horror show I've come across in the history of the genre when it comes to the variety of the kind of stories you can get. Sometimes you can get Goosebumps, Monster of the Week kind of stuff. Sometimes you can get ghost stories reminiscent to something that you would see in Are You Afraid of the Dark, or some wild, crazy stuff that you would see from Are You Afraid of the Dark as well. And then sometimes you will get like stories that feel kind of Black Mirror-esque, which this episode kind of feels like. So if you are a fan of any of those things, you should honestly go check out the Haunting Hour show. And if this is the first time you've found my channel and you haven't seen some of my other Haunting Hour reviews, check those out if some other episodes strike your fancy. But if you want to try this one, and if you haven't seen it before, you're doing yourself a great service in checking this out, because this is one of the better acted episodes, one of the more memorable stories that you can come across in this show, I feel, which is pretty much chock full of memorable stories. So with that being said, I'm going to briefly touch on the plot and then get into my review. I'm going to keep the same type of reviewing I've been doing for a short while now for this. So yeah, I'm going to keep it very brief here. So all you need to know is that the core concept of this story involves the main character here named Josh. And Josh, he's like maybe like a 16, 17-year-old kid, and he has a twin brother named Matt. And the two of them kind of have this relationship where Matt, he's like basically the perfect child, and Josh, he's the unperfect one, right? And we see this dynamic play out early on in the episode at dinner when Josh and Matt's parents are asking about their report cards, and Josh gives his, grades being like, a couple of B's here and there, maybe a few A's. But then his perfect brother Matt gets an A minus, and his parents are like extremely furious with Matt. And Josh is like, hey, you guys need to lighten up. He's the perfect one. He can slip up every once in a while and be like me. But apparently his parents find that to be a big error on Matt's part. And then shortly after that, while Josh is hanging out in his room with Matt, we see Matt collapse, looking like he's ill, which carries over into the next day when they're at school, and we see Matt get ill at school, and then, the boy's parents are called to come pick him up. And Josh decides to go home with his brother to make sure he's okay. And Josh is later told that Matt is going to be taken to a, facility for treatment. And when his brother is taken, he's trying to ask his mother for, answers, and his mother's not giving him anything. And slowly but surely, Josh is becoming convinced that something happened to his brother, and he's trying to get down to the bottom of it. And as he's digging into it all, he realizes that his brother might be in a grave situation. And what he ends up finding out about his brother is very harrowing, very eye-opening in that shocking twist kind of way, where it's basically a big old Deus Ex Machina recontextualizing the whole story into something completely different that Josh, or we as the audience, never saw coming, involving the brother Matt, which plays into the twist ending near the end, where there's another twist to be thrown at the audience about Josh, and I'll just leave it there. So that, in a nutshell, is what you need to know about The Perfect Brother. I kept it very vague because this is an episode that quite literally hinges on both of the twists. Without the twists here, I don't think the episode would be nearly as iconic, so I do not want to spoil them for you. So, yeah, let's talk about The Perfect Brother. So, like I alluded to in the beginning, I think that this is one of the better acted episodes of the show. I don't know the main character's name, like his actor, like actual name or stage name, I should say. But I recognize the actor from being a character in Degrassi. I think his name was like Declan in that show. Whoever it is, this guy did a phenomenal job playing Josh. And Josh, what he goes through in this story is probably some of the more emotional stuff you're going to see out of The Haunting Hour. It is fantastic stuff. It's up there with Flight and Creature Teacher if you like emotions. Maybe even some aspects of Grandpires and Toy Train. And the cheesy episode Goodwill Towards Men. But, yeah, this is an absolute classic. I think in a large part due to the main character being as well performed as they are. And I'm not going to lie, the whole family dynamic in this story is super creepy and unhinged. And there leaves, or I guess lingers, a level of intrigue that a lot of Haunting Hour stories tend to have, but not to this degree. And I think they're all well performed as well. So basically, all the acting performances in this episode, even down to the extras that we see in the back half of the episode, as you'll see when Josh goes to look for his brother Matt, that was incredible stuff. Even the practical effects that you see in this episode look very cool and bizarre. Maybe some cliche sound effects here and there, but that's like maybe used once or twice, so that's kind of forgivable. But in tandem with the acting performances, there's some great editing. There's some great set pieces for this show's standards. A lot of the time with The Haunting Hour, you might get some episodes that basically take place entirely in this same neighborhood that they always filmed in. Or you'll get some episodes that, they'll go to a school here, go out in the woods there. You have some scope involved. You get some scope here, like your average, I would say, Haunting Hour episode. So it's serviceable on that. But the editing here is pretty typical for the show. Nothing too special. But it's solidly done to couple with the great acting. And all that accompanied made this episode an easy watch. So yeah, big compliment there. When it comes to the story, this is definitely a emotional story. This is supposed to be more existential in nature. And the closest relative to this story that I've come across in kids' horror, where there's actually two, I would say that this reminds me a lot of Don't Forget Me from Nightmare Room, and it reminds me a lot of The Perfect School from Goosebumps. It's almost like if you took both of those stories and kind of put them into a blender a little bit. That's basically what you get here. I do think personally, and I haven't read Don't Forget Me's book, even though I heard it's one of R.L. Stine's best books of all time. I've been putting that one off. I have a feeling that that's probably better than this episode. And in some ways, I think some aspects of Perfect School I like more than this episode. And that's not to take anything away from the writers who wrote this story, but it's actually a testament because I do think that it matches that quality in some aspects. And I think that the one thing that it outshines better than what I've seen, at least from the episode of Don't Forget Me and from the versions I've experienced with The Perfect School, is the fact that there is some shocking and truly they just went there kind of moments involving that back half of the episode. And honestly, the Deus Ex Machina climax twist plus the ending twist coupled together made this a very darkly toned story, unlike its former counterparts where they kind of ended up on a somewhat good note for the characters involved. This one took the darker approach, which I weirdly like over the others as well. So yeah, these do have some edges. There are some edges here, I should say, compared to the others that this story kind of reminds me of. But yeah, the story here about trying to save your brother and trying to uncover the truth when your parents are lying to you and you can't trust your parents. We've seen these tropes done a lot of the times in kids' horror, but normally there's not really much emotional or legitimate stakes involved. And I think that this episode brings some legitimate stakes to the forefront, and it's relatable stakes I mean, this kind of reminded me of a similar story. I forget what it is, but I've read it in the past. It's about it's like an urban legend of the girl who loses her mother in a hotel in a foreign country, and when she goes to leave her mother who's sick in the hotel, she goes out to go find medicine for her, and when she comes back to the hotel, the front desk clerk tells her the room that they're booked in doesn't exist, right? And the character has to, go manic and trying to figure out where this room is, and trying to figure out if the hotel clerk is lying to her. It kind of reminds me of that setup, and I like that there's some genuine intrigue built into that story already that you don't really have to do too much with. And all of that coupled together really does make a fun story, despite it being kind of a sad one. Because this is an emotional one. So yeah, I mean, nothing really too harsh to be said about the story. It's very serviceable, if not great. I guess we'll talk about the twists. And I think what really makes this episode, right, is the twists. Both twists in here are really good. Even the one, especially the ending twist, if you know what you're looking for, I think you can easily predict the ending twist if you haven't even seen this episode before. But the climax twist, I think, is really good as the Deus Ex Machina kind of thing, because it recontextualizes a story in a whole different lens than what you thought of before. And I love it when stories or episodes are able to accomplish this. And I say accomplish because there's a lot of stories that attempt it, but they don't really accomplish it because either they can make a story feel all for nothing, they can make a story feel like you just wasted your time, or it can just come out of left field or feel left field and make you pissed off. This doesn't do any of that. It all feels like it makes sense. It feels like there were some breadcrumbs established in the story to help it make sense. And given what's added on afterwards, I think that addition does help this episode than if it just ended at the Deus Ex Machina point that we learn about Matt. If it just ended there and it didn't have the ending addition with all the extra context and the extra twist, this wouldn't be as high as it is. I feel for a lot of people. But because that's there, it really does help accentuate an already pretty good story, right? So yeah, a lot of sound positives with this episode. I really have a lot of sound positives. But I do have some minor things. And when I say minor, these can kind of come across as nitpicky, and which they kind of are, admittedly. But I say this with the utmost honesty I can have about The Haunting Hour as a show. Because my first kind of negative is not really a real negative. It's maybe like a 0.1 deduction, if anything. Is the whole Terminator-esque idea that the story has, and I'll just leave it there. I'm not going to go any further than that. There's a certain aspect involving, if you've seen James Cameron's Terminator movie, the technology that you see there similarly done here. And I'm not going to go any further. That when you really sit down and think about it, there's certain things said from certain characters later on about this hypothetical technology and why certain characters are going through what they're going through and all this stuff and what have you. And while that's fine and dandy, there's a certain aspect of it that kind of feels shoehorned in and involves this stuff of warranties and upgrading, software and stuff like that. And, you gotta put the context together here of what that entails. But aside from that, I do feel like they kind of shoved their foot in their mouth when they did that. Haunting Hour is known for this, where they'll have so many different ideas to match a theme of a story they have going on that they throw out all these different either gag stunts or I guess gag horror shoots to throw into the episode to offer some sort of additional thing that's going on. Here it's like a piece of dialogue and background information, but The Haunting Hour notoriously does this, where they just have to insert something into a great episode that just makes you think, why is that there? And I feel like if this little piece of dialogue wasn't said by a certain character, they could have easily just gone with, oh, they're being replaced. But because of this whole, like, upgraded technology and stuff like that, it makes you question, like, the validity of the machinery going on in this episode. And it kind of comes across like maybe these fictional machines are kind of stupid. Um, or maybe they're just building as they go. I don't know how else to put it. I really don't want to spoil it, but yeah, it leaves a little too many eyebrow hairs raised for me to not mention it. But like I said, it's like a 0.1 deduction. It's like more of a nitpick than anything. But really, my bigger gripe with this episode, surprisingly enough, even though I said that this is an emotional story, even though I say the acting performances are great, I do feel like the biggest sin of this episode, if there is a sin, is the hit the ground running nature of the story and getting right into the nitty gritty of it without really expanding the characters and their relationships better. I feel like if we had more of Josh and Matt's relationship and dichotomy in their twin sibling ship and I guess friendship together, instead of just having like a minute opening shot in a gymnasium and then immediately jumping to the family dinner to kick off the rest of the story, I feel like if this episode didn't have the 22-minute traditional time crunch and was maybe able to be given 5 extra minutes to flesh out the relationship in the beginning, it kind of could have come across like padding a little bit to some. But I think expanding on this relationship, expanding on their love for each other would have made the story actually register more emotionally. I do feel like since I've seen this episode a few times, I kind of know what to expect. So I guess this might be like a more retroactive negative than the first time I saw it. But I will say this time watching it, I'm thinking to myself around like the 10-minute mark, I'm like, you know what? I do wish that they fleshed out these twins' relationship. Because I feel like if they would have fleshed out, just 5 extra minutes in the beginning, this middle portion would hit so much better. And it's good. It's still a good mid portion. I'm not saying that it's a bad one. I'm just saying that I kind of just wanted more there to make the story feel a little more whole and a little more believable. I can see a situation for some of you out there who might have a difficulty plugging into Josh and Matt's relationship and might actually think that it's just kind of there and kind of cliche and corny because they don't spend enough time on it, which is fair. But that's just something that I see that could be a legitimate weakness to this episode. And to be honest, I was kind of weighing if I do view it as a negative, and sadly, I think I do, because I just wish that there was more there. So because I wish there was more there, I'm going to have to point it out. But aside from those things, y'all, I think The Perfect Brother is a very good Haunting Hour episode. In fact, I think it's a great Haunting Hour episode. So when I say great, that automatically means from a 0 to 5 star basis, it's getting above a 4.5. It's getting above a 4.5. And for all you out there that are wondering about my grading system or have been over the years, if I give anything in kids horror a 4.5 or higher, which is considered an A tier to me, and that 5 out of 5 is the only S tier grade I give, that means that the story genuinely deserved it, right? I'm not curving anything here. It landed here because it earned it. You know what I mean? Sometimes I can put something at a low A if I really want to forgive something that has a lot of flaws and I'm curving it just a slightly bit. This I don't feel like I'm doing because I'm giving this a very fair score, I feel, and I decided on the rating to be a 4.7 out of 5 stars. This is an exceptional episode of Kids Horror Television, probably top 50 of all time. This is a must-experience episode in the genre if you haven't seen it before. If you have, you probably understand where my love is coming from. I have seen a few people in the past kind of beat this episode up a little bit, but I think it's a very solid episode, and you can't really go wrong here. Very cool story. So yeah, that's my thoughts on The Perfect Brother. Let me know down in the comment section if you've seen this episode before. Do you love it? Do you hate it? I'm dying to know. And I'll see you next time.